Hello, and welcome to Esther's Gardening Adventures. I'm Esther, and today I'm bringing you something special. I did my first collaborative project with a YouTube channel, Erin, at the subject of plants, and we basically sat down and talked one evening over Zoom about everything you could imagine about gardening, about winter sowing, about our challenges, our dreams, our recommendations to others, all kinds of things. And the discussion was so great that we decided that rather than cutting it down to like 20-minute segments, we would post the whole thing in two pieces. So this is part 2 of our discussion. And if you want to see part 1, I'll have a link in the show notes to that in to her video, but also please check out Erin's page, The Subject of Plants. She does a lot of winter sowing, and she also is part of a community garden, which I just find so fascinating. And we talk about that a little bit in this video. But yeah, so check it out. Tell me what you think, and I hope you enjoyed as much as Erin and I did. Oh, and you'll be joining us in the part of our discussion where we're talking about deciding what kind of videos people want to watch on our channels. So let's check into the conversation starting here. I'm always debating, and maybe you can tell me how you think about this. I'm always debating, is this too basic? Will anybody actually care about how I'm transplanting my radishes? Like tomorrow I'm going to have people see me transplanting my lettuces. Like, sure, are people actually going to care? Like, is that so fundamental and simple that nobody's going to watch it?
I mean, yeah, I guess that gets into sort of the like, just doing something versus documenting it and sharing it, or, there's sort of that balance. But no, I mean, I think it's hard for me to judge because like, I just know, like, I've never wondered about those things, it's just always been a part of my life, but I think there are people who really need to see it and need to see it step by step because it's not always intuitive. After you get a hang of it, you can kind of, oh, okay, I could probably plant this one this way and this one this way. But when you first start, and I think people get very nervous about sort of, especially if you start something from seeds and it's tender, and if you put it out and, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to it in the big bad world? And, if you've never done that, I think it is helpful. And I think the people who need that information will find it. I think just speaking for myself, what drew me to your channel was just the very, it was just so relatable. It wasn't like grandiose, and those are fun to watch, the channels that are great.
Sometimes you just want to dream. Sometimes you just turn on this Monty Don or whatever, you're just gonna watch it and just like dream.
But your channel was just so relatable. That's why I reached out to you too, because it was just and I think in general I'm drawn to people who show their ups and their downs, and I think this is how you do it. Let's try it out.
Let's experiment.
Right. Yeah. I'm definitely drawn to that because
me too.
And it feels like, well, she did that. I can go out and do that. You know what I mean? It doesn't feel like, oh, I could never accomplish what she's
make it approachable.
Right. Yeah. I like that kind of stuff because, and especially when people show their ups and downs. If it's all just positive, it gets that's like on anything is social media. It's nice to see people admitting like this worked, this didn't work, and
I think it makes gardening more approachable, like you said. I think when people see that you can have a big mistake, or you can maybe not be sure if you're doing it right, but trying it and experimenting and being creative, it gives them the freedom to think that they can try that, and also the willingness to fail. Because I think just like in cooking or anything, like the only way to get good at it is to be brave and be willing to burn the pan, right? And or boil out all the water or whatever, and so you just really, the great thing about gardening, other than making like a huge investment in a tree that you accidentally cut down or something, there are big purchase and big decisions you make that might be problematic, but
99% of the time for the average gardener, you can try again the next year.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like
Yeah.
there's always
Sometimes you
next
can try
year.
again in the same year too. Yeah.
If you didn't do it right in the spring, try it in the fall.
Right. Yeah. And to me, I always learn way more about the plants that don't do well, because I'm like, okay, why didn't that grow? Why is that having a problem? If something does well, I'm like, oh, that's a pretty flower, But if something doesn't grow well, I know like every stage and what it needs and what's going wrong. And yeah.
So. For me, I really, while COVID-19 was and has been a horrible thing for many people.
Right.
And I think we're still all trying to deal with it mentally. I had the benefit of, my normal work job pre-COVID was going 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. at the latest into the office, an hour-long commute, coming home at 6 or 7 p.m. In the summer, that's enough time to see with the light still on, but you just didn't, I wouldn't have been able to experience all the phases of a garden, know when the sun was shining, be able to go out in the garden and see the plants during the day and how they're behaving. And I really think that the knowledge I've gained, like you said, has been from the ability to literally take a cigarette break, right? Like take a garden break,
Sure.
Every hour or so, and literally just go stand with my vegetables and look at them and like pick away weeds or do whatever for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I think just being in the garden, just physically being there and observing and touching and testing things, it's just the best way to learn.
Sure.
Right?
You make a really good case for gardens at work.
Oh my gosh, I would have loved a rooftop garden at my last place.
Yeah. Because if you think about it, you are inside. I don't currently work, but when I worked in an office, sometimes you get there when it's dark and leave when it's dark, and that's not good. That doesn't.
No, that's true.
Promote health, mental health, and if you had a garden to go look at, that'd be so nice. Yeah. Maybe you can start a revolution and at work and see. So are you thinking about any types of videos you want to do this summer going forward? Some of the stuff you want to share or help people see? Or
honestly, so because my phone has almost no memory storage right now, and I just refuse to spend a lot of money on a hobby, which I love the channel, but I'm not going to spend a huge amount of money in the technology and all of that until like if I, monetize and start making money off of it, then I can invest it in that. But for now, I'm going on the cheap. Like I've spent like $20. Like I bought a microphone, a lapel mic, and a $15 tripod. Okay. It's maybe $25. And like, that's all I've invested in.
Yeah.
So because of that, I kind of decide what I'm going to do on the fly.
Okay.
Like I say, okay, today I'm going to do a video on this, or maybe I'll do a video on this the next 2 days. And then I just produce it with an hour of finishing it, honestly. Like,
oh, nice.
Almost all my videos go out the same day as I film them.
That's nice.
Because I just don't have space in my camera. It's actually a benefit because you don't end up with a queue, right? I don't have space in my camera to hold more than 2 videos at a time. So like,
that's motivating. Yeah.
You gotta get it out, or else you can't do any others.
Sure.
So I think now the Winter Sowing 101 series was definitely intentional. I tried to think through logically all the steps people need to know, and I still am adding to it. Like I'm still going to do one on, even though I did the radishes video, I'm going to try to do one on like properly how to transplant, that kind of stuff. So I'm trying to work through the process, but really kind of as I get to a project or an idea, I just try to take people along on it.
Yeah, that's nice.
Not try to think too hard about it. And then if I find like 3 people watch it, well, then I probably won't do that kind of video again. Right.
Sure. Yeah. You never know. People might find it at different times of the year and stuff too. It might strike them, but yeah. That's a good point. I liked your microphone. I showed it to my husband. I was like, I think I need one of those because it's so windy out here.
Oh, the lapel
My
mic?
videos are so, yeah. I was like, I need to get that.
I don't have it in front of me. It's over there, but the top little fuzzy thing kept coming off the lapel mic. Yeah. So I literally took a rubber band and like attached it, like secured it to it. So it has this like really jerry-rigged look to it with a little rubber band. That's not, I should have like spray painted it or got a black rubber band or something.
No, that's fine. It works. I think it's good. Yeah. It was a good idea. I think I need one because it's so windy. That's the biggest issue out here.
It does help with wind for sure. Although there are times when it definitely still gets the wind on it,
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I was trying to
well,
think.
let me ask you about, so I don't have any children at the moment. So
you have puppies though, which they get into everything too, right? Yeah.
Well, I'm lucky that if I put up a chicken wire fence around something, they just won't go in it.
Oh, that's nice.
So now if when I first put up my only 6-inch tall beds, they just walked right through them. And I was like, okay, we're going to have to resolve this.
Right.
We need if they just see a fence, they won't jump in it, right? They'll leave it alone. So they're generally well behaved when it comes to the garden stuff. So that's not a problem. And my dogs don't really like vegetables that much. So that's not an issue.
Yeah.
But how do you deal with both helping your children understand the gardening process, using them in it while still kind of trying to make the garden a success, right?
Sure. Well, speaking of video editing, most of my video editing is spent editing out the children or editing out me telling the children something. So everything takes longer. And I just try to involve them at different steps, when I'm doing seeds inside, usually one of them will at least come up and say they want to put the seeds in. And as long as it's something where it's not a big deal, if they don't do it perfectly, I'll say, okay. If it's a certain plant where I'm like, no, I really need to focus on the right amount and the right spot and blah, blah, I'll do it. But so they're putting seeds in, they're helping me pick stuff out sometimes. We just put, our peas in. It's like a tradition to put the peas in the first week of April. So things like that. You have to just be willing to let them mess up some plants as they learn. Like if something's important, block it off.
Yeah.
But, and follow their interest, whatever they see interesting in the garden, go over and talk to them about it. Harvesting is a great way for them to learn about plants. So they love to pick tomatoes. They don't eat tomatoes, but they love to pick the tomatoes. So letting them pick stuff and thinking about it as sort of life learning, just like all the rest of the stuff that they're learning as well, and say, okay, they're not going to get everything the first year, but like how I grew up in a garden, you pick up stuff year after year and you find plants you like, or you see techniques that your parents are using or things like that. So, and when I can, I let them have a say, like which veggies do you want to grow? And, what are you going to eat? What should we grow? Stuff like that. But, and hopefully they'll take that with them through their life. Maybe they won't. 'Cause I mean, my brothers aren't into gardening and they grew up in the same place I did, so it might stick with them, it might not, but
I don't know. I mean, I always had a plant in the house, or I would put flowers outside, but I was never into gardening until 2 years ago, right? So you just never know when that'll come around for a person. And honestly, I don't think if we hadn't gotten a house with a yard, I probably never would have been able to get this into it.
Yeah.
So I'm really grateful that everything kind of aligned to be able to do that.
Yeah, it is hard to, I've gardened in containers on patios in apartments and stuff, and you can get a lot done, but there is something really nice about just getting in the dirt and creating patches of garden that lets you do a lot more. Because when you're doing containers, you really got to think about, paring it down to what you can the few things you can grow in there. So yeah.
And actually, we were talking earlier about kind of how I got over the challenges I had or whatever at the beginning. Erica Spiritu from Epic Gardening. Now he still does the podcast, but he doesn't do it as dedicated of a way that he did before. But 2 years ago or 3 years ago, he would have experts on as guests. He still does that sometimes, but he really, I was driving for Uber as a side job, at nighttime job, or moonlighting. That's the word.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
And so I subjected many riders to gardening podcast episodes. But just using every minute I could to absorb knowledge from somewhere. And I find it fascinating now that I'm getting into it, so I mean, I'd say when I'm not watching junk TV, it's gardening stuff. So.
Oh yeah, all the time. I run out of gardening stuff to watch sometimes because I'm like, seen it. Yeah. Yeah. But there's so much to learn, and everybody takes a different approach too.
Yes.
You can watch 5 different people talk about planting lettuce, and it's still, everybody takes a different approach, or sets it up differently, or it's interesting for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing about like why it's okay to do a simple video about how you transplant whatever plant, right?
Sure.
Because I will watch other people do those and I'll get tips from them, or be like, oh, I didn't think about that aspect, right? And you'll pick up little nuggets, even if and you have a lot of experience doing something, you can still pick up nuggets of information from watching those videos.
Yeah.
But I think it takes a curious mind.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I, speaking of COVID and people being at home and stuff, and people's minds maybe needing distractions, and the gardening has grown and all of that. I hope that sticks around. But it also makes you think like, oh, if people were able to sort of have more time just to think about what they want to think about, what would they get into, and what would they try to explore and stuff. So, yeah. And I think the more you garden, there's someone in town I know who's sort of putting his toe into gardening. And every time I talk to him, he's like, and I'm going to try this, and I'll grow this, and this can go here. And I was like, yes,
go for it.
Right. Where last year it was a small patch. And yeah, so I think that's fascinating too, to see a gardener evolve their own garden. Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
It's funny because, like I said, I'm a writer and I have a lot of people that I am in contact with all the time for stuff. And it used to be, I was very jealous of people who had like football to share, like, your team did good or whatever.
Yeah,
but now I figured out who of my contacts like are gardeners. And now like that's its own language, that's its own thing. And so I'm like, oh, I have it in now. If they know anything about gardening, we can talk about that all day. You know?
Yeah. And gardeners love to talk about gardening. We did the first seeds at the community garden today. So we were there for about 2 hours. Three of us in town were planting the seeds, and we just went on and on about, I think we spent half the time talking almost.
Hey, but
we didn't
that's
see
great.
each other. Yeah. And we were like, and what are you growing? And what's and yeah.
Well, let me ask for your community garden, and I apologize if you've done a lot of videos, but I haven't seen a lot of videos done on that.
Yeah, I haven't really. I have to say the channel was just, I had the winter sowing videos, and I was looking for more winter sowing results videos. So I just put mine up because I wanted to see more like that, just what people grew and what worked. And now I'm like, okay, now I need to come up with some other stuff.
Do it on your garden, your community garden. I'm fascinated by
some more of it. Yeah.
Or like even I like one question I have for you on that is, how do you pick, given that you're going to be giving it away and to people, you want to pick things that people are going to want to eat, right?
Yes. Yeah.
How do you decide? Because food is such a personal choice, right? How do you decide what to grow? And so this is your second year trying this?
No, this is a great question. So we started the garden, we put in like 1 bed and 20. So it's a lot that the village owns, and they said we could use it for a community garden. And so we've just been building it up. So I think we started with 1 bed in the fall of 2018, and it just a little bit grew, so it wasn't much to give away. 2019 and 2020 we had full growing seasons with 9 raised beds and 2 in-ground beds and 2 herb boxes. So it was quite a bit, and we've definitely learned along the way what works and what doesn't, and I'm sure again this year we will as well. We found that plants that produce large quantities of maybe smaller things work better.
Like cherry tomatoes.
Right. Cherry tomatoes versus big tomatoes. Definitely. Beans and peas and things like that. We've done cabbage there, and it looks really nice and it grows well, but it takes up so much space and you only get a certain amount.
1 head.
So we're not doing that this year. Zucchini is great because it keeps going all summer. Cucumbers are good when they do well. So anything that we can kind of continually harvest, get so we bring our food to the library. And there's also a school community garden. The school's not like in town. It's like a few miles down the road. And they bring food there. So people know they can go to the library and get food. So it's easier if there's a large quantity of smaller things. So you can grab a little of this, a little of this.
You can divide it up easier.
Right. Yeah.
And I think it's actually really smart to not have them go to the garden to get it, because while it's nice to have people harvesting their own food and there's a nice connection there, you also risk them harvesting at the wrong time, right?
Well, I have mixed feelings on that, because I feel like I'm fine with people. If people know what they're doing and they go in and get stuff, great. And I run into people and talk to them and put it on Facebook, and, if you know what you're doing, go ahead. But part of me is like, if you pull out some carrots before they're ready, but you tried it and you like said, I'm going to go in and pull a carrot, I'm okay with that.
That's fair, because you're still learning. Is it big enough?
Right.
You're learning what it should have looked like. Yeah.
If somebody went out and like tore out the tomato plants or something, that would be frustrating. But if somebody grabbed something before it was ripe, and that's another good reason to do stuff that keeps producing. Because if somebody grabs a bunch of tomatoes that weren't ripe yet, okay, that stinks, but we'll have some more in a week, But I have to say, I also do a flower garden by this pavilion in the park. We planted flowers around it, and I'll go over and check on it. And one time I went and there was a plant that was kind of messed up, and some dirt was dug, and I was like, what's going on here? And there were like middle school age boys came over, and they said, we found a baby bird that died and we buried it there. And I thought, oh my God, that's fine.
That's so sweet.
So, and they're like, there was a nice place to bury a bird. I was like, that's fine. You can mess up the plants for that.
Good compost for next year.
Right. So, part of me is
sweet.
like, as long as it's not malicious intent, if something gets messed up, but somebody was curious enough to get their hands in there, I can work with that, and most people are courteous about it.
I would love to see more videos about that.
Okay, I'll try. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard because there's other people involved, right?
I'm there a lot by myself. Well, I'm there with the boys. And so I'm like running around with the boys, but I just need to go over there sometime and just film stuff. And
give a tour of the garden.
Yeah.
What you're trying this year, and your harvests. I would love to see your harvests and like taking them to the library and how you divide them up when you take them to the library. Yeah. And I think all of that, I would love to see that, because I think supporting the concept of community gardening and giving to the community is so important. I think it's a really important part of what society is missing.
Yeah. It's part of a sort of bigger revitalization effort that not just myself, but a group is involved in that I am part of. But also we are sort of a food desert. If you look at our town on a map, it's like, here's our town and here's nothing, and
surrounded by fields, like you said.
Yeah. It's an agricultural community, but all the stuff growing around us, we don't eat.
Right.
It
goes to feed cattle, or it goes to a cereal mill or wherever.
Yeah. And the only thing that keeps us from being a food desert is the median income. They assume people can afford a car and drive, but our closest like actual grocery store is 10 miles, I think. No, not 10 miles. No, it's gotta be less. 6 miles, maybe 7 miles, something like that. But
I don't mean to rub salt in the wound there, but we have. Now, to be fair, I am just outside of the DC area, but also when we bought the house we were very intentional about making sure we were close to things, So we have a Mom's Organic Market within probably a mile and a half. We have a Shoppers Food within 2 miles. We have a Giant probably within 2 miles, maybe 10 minutes. So it's probably for like 4 miles. Yeah, but I mean, we have 3 grocery stores. Actually, Aldi's also, and Lidl. Yeah. So within 15 minutes, 5 to 15 minutes, you can get to 5 different grocery stores.
Yeah. And we lived in Chicago. We could walk to 2 or 3 grocery stores. So it was a big.
It blows my mind though, how like that is where we live. And then there's places where there's like nothing.
Right. And ours really isn't that far. There's places around us that are much farther out, so but then we have people who are food insecure in our community, who are struggling to get enough food, and we have a lot of seniors in our community and stuff, so having that extra food, and so we bring food there, the school garden brings food there, or they give it to the students during the school year. And then people in our community, it's agricultural community, so there's still people who keep home gardens and stuff like that. They'll bring stuff to the library as well.
That's wonderful.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, that's the one thing about I know sometimes small towns get a bad rep, and pros and cons that we could go on a long conversation about that, but there is definitely that sense of, you need something, we'll get it, we'll take care of it, people are hungry, we'll get them food, there is that sense of that,
and it is lost in big communities. I remember when we moved in to our house, I had this big dream about being friends with everyone in the neighborhood, them all knowing my name, me knowing all of their names. And I would be gardening out front, and I'd talk to the neighbors, and we had a housewarming party, and I invited everybody on the block. Now, I didn't put out letters, but everybody I talked to got invited. None of them came. Not one of them came. And I wasn't hurt by it, but I was just trying to even get to know. This is pre-COVID, right? So they didn't have that excuse. And to be fair, it was on a Sunday and it was football or whatever. I think a local team was playing Ravens or Redskins or something. But either way, it was kind of I did end up making a few friends who I still talk to, when I see them or whatever. But, in this town, people have busy lives, even with COVID.
Sure.
And not all of them want to talk to you. Not all of them want to be your friend, and I was but I want to know everybody.
Yeah.
My husband's it's okay, honey. It's all right.
Right. Yeah. I mean, but then that goes along with, everybody knows you, and everybody.
That's true.
Knows
then you have no privacy either. No, it's true.
So
I worked for 2 years in a small town of less than 7,000, I think, in Delaware.
Okay.
At a newspaper, and literally everybody was cousins or sisters or uncle, whatever. They all had some connection of friendship, school, or something. You could not do anything in that town without everybody else knowing the next morning.
Yeah.
They would know what karaoke song you sang. I'm not kidding.
Oh no, I know. Great. Yeah. We're just above 1,000 here. So yeah.
Oh, so it's even more so in your area. Yeah.
Yeah.
But still, it's really great that you do that with a community.
Yeah. And it's, people jump in, and even today I was hey, anybody have this? I was trying to make those arch trellis things. I'm sure somebody's got this laying around somewhere, or, so there's definitely that pitching in kind of thing.
That's cool.
Yeah. But, yeah. And even the red tape to get the community garden started was pretty low. I wrote a proposal on a piece of paper and said, this is what I want to do. And then, okay.
I love it.
Which again, that's that can be a barrier for a lot of people in places. If there's codes that keep them from gardening, or there's land, you have to go through red tape to get there to put something in, or, to garden.
My mom is very lucky that the town that she lives in Maryland, she and my dad downsized and they rent. And like I said, she gardened. She loves gardening, and for her, that's part of her sanity also, just like it is for all of us who garden. And the local newspaper actually lets people use its property, it's the land it owns around the newspaper building for the community garden for free. They probably view it as not paying for mowing services, right? Sure. But they don't have to take care of the land.
Yeah. That's a great idea, though. I'm all about, I call it public gardening.
Yeah.
You have your private retreat garden, but I think if gardeners were able to do a lot more in public spaces, it would make a really big difference, and then I think it gets other people interested if you're out there gardening. Yeah.
It's funny you say that, because there's these little, I live between two households that they speak Spanish. They're wonderful. I get along with them great wonderful people. One of them's a pastor, and he actually runs a food kitchen out of the house during COVID to feed his congregation in the community. So it's really neat, but there is a little bit of a language barrier there, even though we can say hi in basic Spanish and English. But there's some little girls that live next door were coming by, and they're pointing at things to their parents, and I was telling them the names. And I think the nice thing about having the community garden, or having the garden in the front yard, is sort of a way for people to see how to garden also, just by buying, or like they can see the rows of radishes now growing out of the ground from the street. And I think it's really neat because now maybe these girls came from neighborhoods where their families were able to garden and they know it, but maybe they didn't. And maybe this is their first time seeing, a garden growing that's not just flowers.
Yeah.
So, I'd like to think that it helps build awareness and a consciousness around gardening in general. Maybe
I think it
my
does
tiny small space.
Yeah, I think it definitely has ripple effects, and a lot of times you don't get to see the ripples. That's with a lot of things in life. But I think it also just sort of makes things that it makes people think, oh, that's okay. I think for some reason as a human species, maybe it's a protective thing. We don't want to sort of be the first one to step out on the ledge, and look over. Like we want to, she did it, so I could probably,
That's true. And I've never been that person who cares about that. I've never,
no.
Like we used to do team exercise building things, and I would do something and then people would be like, but you didn't conform to everybody else. I'm like, but mine made the most sense.
Yeah.
Not the best example because you want to be politically correct too, but
no, but you need some of those, the people that start start, and I don't want to say trends. It's not a trend.
Groundbreakers there is a term for it. The
early adopters.
Yeah.
That was the marketing term.
Oh,
yeah. I went to business school, so that's how I see things. But yeah.
Or breaking the seal, which is a horrible way to describe it, right? But someone who kind of demonstrates that it's possible. Yeah.
Right. And I think we need that to some extent, because even, in our neighborhood, it's like most people have all grass in the front, but there's one woman who, we talked, and she has quite a bit of garden taking up her front yard, and quite a bit of it's sort of native plants and stuff like that. And, I think the more you see that, the more it's like, oh, I could do this. I could, but if all you see is lawns, and it's kind of like, oh, well, that's what everybody else is doing.
That's the norm.
Yeah. So that helps too, to see something different. Yeah.
So it's kind of funny because part of my plan for my front yard is to not have to mow. And here's the thing, we don't own a lawnmower.
Oh,
our front yard is so tiny and our backyard is so tiny that I can weed whack. And I'm not joking. I can weed whack the backyard in 10 to 15 minutes and be done.
Oh, nice.
And my husband doesn't like it because it doesn't look even. And it depends on how aggressive I want it. But I like it because I can avoid the things I know the groundhog likes and all that.
Right.
But so my goal and part of this is also laziness. The more I can have things growing and it look organized and nice, the less I have to mow on a weekly basis.
I like how you think that growing an entire garden is lazier than 10 minutes of weed whacking.
Somehow it is in my mind.
Yeah.
Somehow it is. And I think it's because when I'm gardening, I'm spending 5 minutes at a time. Mm-hmm. Not in the spring and when you're setting up your beds, but I'm not spending that much at a time out there.
Sure.
And I get to pick the time of day.
Enjoyable too. Yeah.
And just the fun of reaping the reward versus
you just cut it and it grows, and you cut it and it grows, and there's no benefit.
What are you gonna do with it other than putting it in your compost? It has no value whatsoever.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. We're moving towards a grass-free lawn, hopefully. This year we did crocuses in the lawn the last 2 years.
Nice.
And I feel like that's easing everybody into the fact that there's not going to be any grass there soon.
My goal is to have obviously I want to have beds with native flowers and stuff like that, but ultimately I would love it to be all clover, and violets, wild violets in our area, are native. I would just love to have a sea of white and purple little flowers in the spring.
Yeah.
That would you could walk barefoot through. Of course, the bees would be everywhere, so maybe not barefoot, in sandals.
Yeah.
Through it. Yeah.
No, I
My
think
husband still thinks dandelions are evil, so I'm trying to teach him.
Yeah.
He's of kind of the old school, everything needs to be mowed concept, and I'm
Sure.
slowly.
Yeah. You should have them watch. There's this video of a woman who lived through the Depression, and she talks about how during the Depression they would walk around with their little knives and dig up dandelions because they could eat the root and the leaves and the flower. And so to me, I'm always like, all right, we got about 200 dandelions between the front and the back. How long could we survive on dandelion root?
It's your own survival crop.
Right. Yeah. If something went down, so maybe if you look at it that way, you can see. And we made dandelion tea because the boys wanted to try it. We made dandelion tea last year.
Was it bitter? I imagine it was a little bitter.
Yeah, it was kind of whatever. It wasn't anything special. It was fine. Yeah, it was a little bitter. But it was out of the flowers, and it was mostly like for fun, they wanted to try it and stuff.
It's funny because you're prompting me to remember. So I've never thought of like having a foraging background, but my grandma would pick dandelion greens when they were really young and make dandelion salad.
Yeah.
Like it was so bitter. Oh God, I hated it as a kid so much. Like not dandelion salad.
Yeah.
But she would, and you had to get them before they flowered when they were still very young, so it was tender. And she also once made dandelion wine, which I was too young to try, but it looked very pretty.
Yeah.
So I guess I do have a little bit of that in my background, but not as much as,
Just tell your husband that, they're your backup food in case you're gonna be out there digging up dandelion roots.
I mean, the good news is my husband generally leaves the yard. I mean, he has opinions about things and we talk about things, but generally he leaves the gardening in the yard to me. And, I appreciate that when I bring in a random vegetable straight from the garden bed, he'll taste it or whatever. Like he's tasted a lot of things. It's not like it's all a new experience for him, but he's willing to try things from the garden and support me and all of that, because it really would be hard to do all of that if he wasn't kind of supportive of it.
Yeah. What part do you think he could grow to have the most interest in? Is there a certain part or?
I mean, I think potentially the berries part, he loves blueberries and we have 2 blueberry plants. And I think I could see him sneaking out there once the blueberries start producing and getting his own blueberries. I could totally see that.
Yeah. My husband's pretty good at harvesting too. I have to say that harvesting is my weakness. I don't know why. I'm just not. I've gotten better at it and I've pushed myself to do it, but sometimes I'm like, I just like growing plants. and I like harvesting. I like eating it, but it's not like I'm running out there. This year I did much better because I pushed myself to do better, but I'm never like running out there, waiting to get something to harvest. And at the community garden, I've gotten better at that too. But the other woman there, I mean, she'd go in and find every last single thing that was ripe, and she was.
That's how I am. I go out 4 times a day looking for stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it is challenging though, to your point, that knowing when to harvest things, especially as a new gardener. Is it right yet?
That would be a great series too. If you did that. Yeah.
And also making sure you use it. So I think when I started up gardening it was like the fall of 2019 was when I started really planning it and all of that. I had this vision of canning tomatoes and like harvesting these bushels of berries and peas and stuff. And the reality was like, you might get a bowl full of peas out of the size garden I have, right?
Right.
You'll get a couple tomatoes a day, maybe, if you're being super, or like, a handful of cherry tomatoes every couple of days or whatever, right? You're not, the amount it's producing, you can store some of it, but most of it is for consumption as you pick it.
Right. Yeah.
And so once I started thinking about it in that way, I would think, okay, what do I like? I'm going to have a salad today. I'm going to go pick my lettuce. I'm going to pick a little bit extra so my husband can have lettuce in his sandwiches, right? And I'll let him know it's in there. So trying to think of ways to use it in an incremental basis
Yeah.
made it much easier for me to use more of it. I think we wasted very little, honestly.
Yeah. Same here. Yeah. That's a really good point. I think that I would decide, okay, I want to use carrots for dinner tonight, and then go get the carrots and then use them for dinner. Yeah. Versus having a stack of carrots and what am I going to do with these? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's a really good point. Yeah. Yeah. I think harvesting can be intimidating in the beginning, but again, it's something you learn. Yeah. But,
oh yeah. I mean, half of my YouTube videos throughout the year depend on what I'm doing. You know, it's like when to harvest radishes or whatever. Like I'm trying to figure out that step. Like, yeah, I mean, I figured out how to do square foot gardening and how to plant all the stuff, but then I was like, wait, I don't even know what the radishes should look like when I harvest them.
Right.
I realized like, so I had to like watch a video on it, you know, and
figure it out.
Yeah.
Are we so lucky though that we can do that now, you know, that we can watch it all? And maybe that's part of the revival too, is that it's much easier to see some of this information.
To learn.
Yeah.
I don't know. My grandma would regularly call the local
extension office.
Yeah. She would call them all the time. I didn't hear it personally, but my mom would tell me about it. Oh, she's calling the extension office again to find out about this thing or that thing.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So it was like her own little YouTube Google thing, you know. She could just get on the phone and call them.
Yeah. Now you have the comment section. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. I think that's fun. Do you have any questions? Any other questions? I know we've been chatting back and forth, but do you have any other questions for me at all, or?
No, I think that covers it. You know, one of the questions you were going to ask is a way to stay accountable and focused on projects. And I think it does help me when I'm thinking about what I'm going to create a video on. It helps me think through the next steps that I need to do, you know, like when I'm doing a project, you know, trying to think through the steps logically in video form in my mind actually helps me kind of get organized mentally then for doing what I need to do. So in some ways it kind of helps me. On the other hand, what I've been surprised about that I didn't expect to be an issue is my first year gardening, I did like weekly videos on how the garden was doing or whatever, but I kept it kind of very high level. And now I'm making it much more about every little step. And there's a certain vulnerability to that.
Okay.
And there's a certain bit of privacy you're giving up also, because sometimes I just like to garden and tinker and mess up and like just be in the garden mindlessly.
Sure.
And when you're creating a video, you can't really do that. You can a little bit, but you always kind of have to be mindful of not bending over and putting your butt in the camera, or like, you know, like there's certain things.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to see that.
That'd be a whole different channel. Yeah.
Indeed. And so it's, you know, it is. And also like, positioning yourself in a way the camera can see it to the extent you can, and just trying to be more mindful of how people visualize things. It's a totally different process than just going out and doing it.
Yeah.
And even for winter sowing my jugs, you know, I can go through 10 in like whatever amount of time, but if I'm videotaping it, you know, it takes probably 2-3 times that amount. So
right. And just and especially the more practiced you get at something, I think the harder it is to break it down and say it to people who don't have any reference. You know, because I just be like, you pop the thing in the dealie and you go with the, you know, and inside you have to be like, do this and now do this. And that it can be challenging. Yeah.
You know, that's interesting you say that. I think I have the benefit, while I had the disadvantage at the beginning to you of who was raised gardening and learned those things as you went, I also have the benefit of having the naivety and the learning and kind of being aware of what people are trying to learn.
Sure.
Because there's questions in my mind still that I'm working out. And so I think you and I can both offer different perspectives to it. But, you know, sometimes a really seasoned gardener just isn't it's so intuitive to you, right? You've worked through those questions when you were 6 years old or whatever, right? Like,
well, over time. But it's like, there might be a step where I wouldn't even necessarily realize
that you should talk about it or show it.
Yeah, that someone wouldn't naturally do that or something, or like yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think that's another great thing about your videos is that they are really accessible that way, that it is really step by step for sure, that you can see everything being planted and
whether you want to or not.
Well, that's the great thing. You can choose. People.
Yeah, you can fast forward. You can skip around all you want.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's important to. I really like seeking out more sort of varied content like that, where it's not everybody planting the same thing in the same way, and people at different levels. And I think that's important. I think that's important for any subject, really, to learn it. Yeah, for sure.
Because you can still learn stuff from master gardeners 100%.
Yeah. And I'm
no matter how novice you are.
Right. And I mean, just because I've been around it my whole life doesn't mean I'm an expert at it. And even my mom, who taught me, isn't an expert. She sells plants die all the time, or she tries stuff and it doesn't work.
It does.
out.
Yeah.
And she's been gardening 60 plus years. I don't know. She grew up with a garden too. So 70 years, so, and there's still stuff that doesn't work. So,
So my parents come from the generation where you rototilled the land, you planted the things in the soil right, you pulled out the weeds, or if you had weeds on your lawn, you would use whatever it took to get rid of them, whether it be poison or not.
Yeah.
Like when we moved into the house, my mom saw a tiny poison ivy plant, and then she took me to go get Roundup, and I fought on it, and luckily they didn't have the poison ivy thing in stock.
Yeah.
And nothing against them, right? Like that's what, and also there's nothing against people who take that method. Like that's a personal choice, right? But for me, having the studied chemistry and the environment and climate change and other things kind of side of things, to me, that's not appealing. And trying to find natural solutions is appealing. And so it's interesting, the conversation my parents and I have had since I started gardening, the back and forth about them teaching me things, but then also me teaching them things like a no-dig bed.
Yeah.
And now my mom, I'm helping her build raised beds to help her. So it's really interesting how society changes and learns as it goes too.
Sure. Oh yeah. And my mom and I have very different approaches to gardening too. So we, but I'll go in her garden and do stuff. And she's like, oh, I spread seeds all the time in her garden.
Oh, it probably drives her crazy.
she has a wildflower garden, but she's like, don't spread those seeds. She's like, you can spread these if you have to, but
she has her ways.
Yeah.
No, I get it.
She's always focused on, she likes when her garden looks nice. She likes when it's weeded and stuff's in bloom and she can sit on the porch and look at it. And where I'd rather spend literally all of the daylight hours on my hands and knees covered in dirt. Like I don't usually sit and admire it, It's
interesting.
And,
I think for me, it's a combination because I do like being in the dirt, but then I also really like just sitting there and looking at it, especially like at dusk. And in the spring before the mosquitoes are really bad, because I like sitting there and visualizing what I want to do with the garden. I'm sure my neighbors think I am crazy as anything, because I literally would take bamboo in the evening and I would go around and I would mark out the beds and then I would change where I wanted things to go. And they were probably like, what is she doing? She's laying sticks on the ground in weird patterns. Is she like,
witchcraft or something, or
that is not a pattern I recognize.
Right.
Googling my patterns, making people very confused. So
my mom's like that too. She likes to plan it out, where I'm like, dig up a spot, put a plant in, see what happens, Well,
what's interesting is my front bed, that isn't an option because so the house is almost 100 years old, and the property has gone through, it was rented for a long time before it was fixed up for us to buy it, before it was put on for sale. And then you can tell kind of the different things people have done, but also it's been pretty neglected until we, probably for 10 to 15 years before we got it.
Okay. Yeah.
The land, and somebody at some point put down really high quality, really thick, whatever that gardening cloth is. that's like a weed blocker, but it's been there so long that it's about this deep down, or maybe this deep down, and all the soil is on top of it, and all the weeds have grown on top of it, and it's almost impossible to pull out because the weeds have their hooks down through it.
Yeah. We have some
It
of
is
that too.
devils.
Yeah. They put it right in the garden, and then they covered it with rubber mulch.
Oh.
My whole front garden is rubber mulch.
Oh. Yeah, what were they thinking?
I don't know. Low maintenance, but
exactly.
So low now that weeds come through. So I just pull it out when I can and stuff. But yeah.
So I have to be more intentional about where I put things. Around the tree where I put that one raised bed, I'm not too worried about it because I think it's broken down because of the tree roots. There's less of it there, but yeah. No, my battery is getting low, so we probably
and we've been at it for a while, and I've been busy all day, so I got to get to the kids and stuff. But this was so fun.
Yeah.
So we'll chat again soon, and that's good.
That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Again, if you haven't already, check out part 1 of this video on the subject of plants, the channel, where Erin and I talk about everything else. I mean, you don't want to miss it. Definitely check it out. And also make sure to subscribe to her. And if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, and make sure you subscribe to me if you aren't already. Make sure you have that alarm button set so you get alerts when we post new content like this or other things. And otherwise, I'll see you next time.